carnival of gay romance. When the masks fell, it was supposed to be just another wild night. Just a mask, just music, just lights, just strangers passing in the dark. But that night, something happened that I'll never forget. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a journey of discovery, of desire, of falling for someone when you least expect it. And trust me, every chapter will leave you wanting more. Now let me take you back to the heart of New Orleans, where the streets were alive with celebration, where secrets danced behind glittering masks, and where I met him. Let's begin. The night smelled like sweat, alcohol, and something sweeter I couldn't name. Bourbon Street was exploding with color, glitter raining from balconies, music clashing from every direction, people laughing too loudly, dancing too freely. It was chaos, but the kind that makes you feel alive. I'd never been to New Orleans before. I came here with my friends for one reason: to disappear. To get out of my head, out of my own life, even if only for a weekend. Mardi Gras seemed like the perfect excuse. Everyone was masked. No one had to be themselves. Or maybe everyone finally could. I wore a deep green velvet half mask that covered the top half of my face. It made me feel like someone else, someone bolder, more daring, someone who didn't freeze every time he made eye contact with someone attractive. That night, I needed to be that person. We ended up at a rooftop party above a jazz bar, high enough that the chaos below turned into a muted rhythm, like a heartbeat. People were dancing, some already shirtless, some in extravagant costumes, and others just moving with the music like they'd been waiting all year for this moment. And that's when I saw him. He stood near the edge of the rooftop, leaning casually against the railing like he owned the place. His mask was gold, simple, elegant, and it somehow made his presence louder than everyone else's. He wasn't dressed like most of the guys here. No feathers or sequins, no ridiculous costume. Just a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, chest slightly exposed, and a confidence that was almost magnetic. I tried not to stare. He caught me anyway. I looked away instantly, heart thudding. A minute later, I risked a glance back. He was still watching me, and this time, he smiled. I don't know what possessed me, but I walked over. Every step felt like a dare. When I reached him, he didn't speak right away, just looked at me. I could barely see his eyes behind the mask, but they were dark, steady, and familiar. Not in the "we've met before" way. Familiar like a song you didn't know you knew until the melody hit you in the chest. "First time in New Orleans?" he finally asked, his voice low, a little amused. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," he chuckled. "You keep looking around like you're dreaming." "Maybe I am," I said, surprising even myself with the honesty. He turned to face me fully, and the light caught the edge of his jaw, sharp and golden in the glow of the rooftop lanterns. "Good dream or bad?" "I guess I'll find out," I said. "By the end of the night." His smile widened. "That depends on what you're looking for." I didn't answer, mostly because I didn't know. Was I looking for a one-night thing? A moment to escape everything I'd been avoiding back home? Or just someone who saw me? "You don't talk much, do you?" he asked. "Not when I'm nervous." "And I make you nervous?" "A little." "Good." He said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal, like making someone nervous was something he enjoyed. But it wasn't malicious. It was playful, intimate even. We stood there, just watching each other, while the rest of the party pulsed behind us. For a moment, the crowd disappeared. The music faded. It was just me and him, two strangers in masks suspended in something unspoken. He leaned a little closer, voice softer now. "What's your name?" I hesitated. "Eli." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Eli." "And you?" I asked. He paused, just for a second, then said, "Call me Leo." That name didn't feel fake, but it also didn't feel entirely real. Still, I didn't push. "Want to get out of here?" he asked, nodding toward the stairs. "There's another party across town. Less noise, fewer masks." Something in his voice, the way he said "fewer masks," made my skin buzz. It was an invitation, not just to another party, but maybe to something deeper, something riskier. I knew I should have said no. I didn't know him. I didn't know anything. But something in me, the part that came to New Orleans to escape, whispered yes. I nodded. He smiled again and turned, beginning to walk toward the exit. And just as I started to follow him, I heard someone call out behind me, someone from the party. Loud, panicked. "Hey! Wait! Do you know who that guy really is?" I turned back, heart stalling. But Leo was already gone. I rushed down the stairs 2 at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. The guy's voice from the rooftop still echoed in my ears. "Do you know who that guy really is?" But I didn't stop to ask. I didn't want to know. Not yet. Not if it meant losing the feeling I had just started to taste. When I hit the sidewalk, the crowd swallowed me like a wave. Beads flew through the air, and music thundered from all sides, but none of it mattered. I was scanning the street for Leo, for the man in the gold mask. Then I saw him, just a glimpse, turning down a narrow side street, his black shirt catching the flicker of red and blue lights from a nearby parade float. I shoved through 2 couples and almost tripped over a drunk guy sitting on the curb, but I didn't stop. "Leo!" I called out. He turned his head slightly. I saw a flash of that smile again before he disappeared around the corner. I followed. The side street was quieter, dim. The music became muffled, like a soundtrack in another room. Leo was standing under a street lamp, hands in his pockets, watching me approach like he knew I'd come. "You run fast," I said, breathless. "You came after me," he said, as if it proved something. "Why wouldn't I?" He tilted his head, mask glinting in the low light. "You heard what that guy said. I don't even know what he meant." He stepped toward me. "Do you want to?" That question held weight. I could feel it settle in the air between us like fog. Part of me did want to know. Another part, the louder part, didn't care. It had only been an hour, maybe less, but something about Leo felt different. He didn't just flirt. He observed. He saw things, including me. "What are you hiding?" I asked. He chuckled softly, then leaned back against the brick wall. "Isn't everyone hiding something tonight?" Fair enough. But then he looked up at me and said more seriously, "I'm not dangerous, Eli. I promise you that." The way he said my name, like he'd said it 1,000 times before, sent a ripple through me. I didn't even notice how close I'd gotten to him. The noise of the city was gone now. It was just our breathing, our silence, our questions hanging between us. He reached up slowly and adjusted his mask. "You want me to take it off?" I stared at him. "Do you?" He shrugged. "Only if you want to see who you're really talking to." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He took off the mask. I wasn't ready for it. Not really. I think I expected someone more dramatic, someone who looked like trouble. But what I saw was a guy who looked vulnerable, maybe even a little lost. His eyes were a deep brown, framed by thick lashes. A small scar crossed the edge of his eyebrow and his lips. God,
His lips were curved into a half smile that said he was still watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I didn't move. I just looked at him. "What do you see?" he asked, voice low. "I don't know yet." He smiled wider, like that was the answer he wanted. We stood there for another moment, until he looked over his shoulder toward the noise of the main street. "You want to go somewhere quieter?" he asked. I hesitated. "Where?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and held it up. "My Airbnb's a few blocks away. Balcony, no noise, no masks." He wasn't pressuring me. That much I could tell. He was offering. Genuinely. And I wanted to say yes. Not for sex, though the thought had definitely crossed my mind, but because I wanted to know him. I wanted to sit across from him with nothing between us. I wanted to ask every question that had been forming in my head since I saw him on that rooftop. I said yes. We walked together in silence for a while, the sound of distant music following us like a memory. I noticed the way our arms brushed occasionally. Neither of us moved away. When we reached the building, he led me up a narrow staircase to the second floor. The balcony overlooked a quieter street, decorated with string lights and scattered feathers from old parades. It was peaceful, intimate. He poured us each a drink, something strong and sweet, and we sat side by side on two old wooden chairs. He asked me about my life. I told him more than I expected to, about feeling like I was always performing, always trying to be what people wanted, about how I dated women, sure, but always with a disconnect I couldn't explain, and about how lately I'd been craving something honest, something real. He listened, really listened. When I looked at him, he was watching me like I was the only person in the world. "I wasn't supposed to meet anyone tonight," he said quietly. "I was just here to forget a few things." "Did you?" He looked down into his glass. "No, but maybe that's a good thing." The air shifted again. He turned to me and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hesitation? Longing? And then, in the quiet between our breaths, he leaned in. Our lips were inches apart, and just before they touched, a loud knock pounded on the door. Leo froze. I stared at him, pulse racing. "Are you expecting someone?" He didn't answer. The knock came again, harder this time, followed by a voice. "Leo, open the door. We need to talk now."
The knock echoed through the room again, louder this time, sharper. Leo's body went rigid. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at the door like it had betrayed him. "Leo!" The voice called again. Male, grown, angry. "You can't just disappear on me." I turned to him, my heart racing. "Who is that?" He didn't answer right away, just stood up slowly and set his glass down on the table with this controlled, quiet precision, like he was trying not to crack. "It's complicated," he said finally, his voice low and tight. "Complicated like an ex?" I asked, trying to keep it light, but the tension in my voice betrayed me. He gave a bitter laugh. Short, humorless. "No. Worse." Another knock. The doorknob jiggled this time. My whole body tensed. "Should I go?" I asked. Leo shook his head. "No, please don't." Then he crossed the room in 3 long steps and opened the door. Just a crack. Enough for me to hear the man's voice clearly now. "You left without a word, Leo. You're not answering your phone. You're not responding to anything." "I said I needed a break," Leo interrupted. "Disappearing in the middle of a crisis isn't taking a break. You're being reckless. Again." Again? I couldn't see the guy, but his voice had a commanding presence, older than us, maybe in his 30s or 40s, too familiar with Leo, too disappointed. Leo stepped into the hallway, pulling the door halfway shut behind him. I stayed seated, gripping my glass like it might tell me what was going on. Their voices lowered. I could only catch fragments. Not ready to come back. People depending on you. You don't get to just run every time things get hard. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but how could I not? Every sentence felt like a secret falling out of Leo's mouth. Pieces of a life I knew nothing about, and the way that man spoke to him. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't just a friend. It was someone who knew Leo, knew what he was running from. I stood, not sure what I was supposed to do. Leave? Wait? Yell through the door and ask for the truth? Then the voices stopped. A second later, the door opened again. Leo stepped inside alone. He closed it quietly behind him and leaned against it, eyes closed like he was holding something heavy on his chest. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to be," I replied, even though part of me wanted him to be. "I wasn't lying to you earlier," he said. "About not being dangerous. I'm not, but I should have told you. That guy's my brother." I blinked. "Your brother?" He nodded. "Older, protective, controlling. We're in business together. A non-profit, actually. Youth mental health outreach. He thinks I'm running from responsibility. Maybe I am, but I needed space. I needed to breathe. And tonight, with you." He looked at me then. It's the first time I felt something real in a while. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. But the cracks were showing now, and part of me wondered what else I didn't know. "Why were you running?" I asked quietly. His eyes darkened, but not with anger, more like pain. "I got involved with someone I shouldn't have," he said. "Months ago. Someone on our board. It ended badly. It hurt more people than it should have. I made some terrible decisions trying to fix it, and in the end, I couldn't face it anymore. So I left. Came here. And you met me," I said. A soft smile tugged at his lips. "And I met you." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was honest. And the honesty hit harder than anything else he could have said. I took a step toward him. "So what now?" He looked surprised by the question. "Now?" "Yeah. You gonna run again? Or are you staying?" He walked toward me slowly, like the tension in the air was pulling him closer. "I want to stay," he said, voice quiet. "I want to see where this goes." And just like that, the space between us disappeared. He kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was steady, warm, like he was asking permission with every second it lasted. When we finally pulled apart, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and thought, this is trouble. But maybe it's the kind I need. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket and froze. A message from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You don't know who you're with. Be careful." I stared at my phone for a long time. "You don't know who you're with. Be careful." No name, no context. Just a whisper in digital ink, sharp enough to cut through the warmth I'd just felt in Leo's arms. I didn't even realize he was watching me until I looked up. His smile had faded. "What is it?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated, then held the phone out for him to see. He read the message once. His jaw tightened. He didn't blink. "Do you know who sent this?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Leo,
I don't. People love to stir shit up, especially around me. That's not just shit stirring, I said. That sounds like a warning. He turned away from me, ran a hand through his hair, and walked toward the balcony like he needed the night air to stay grounded. I followed him, cautiously, heart pounding in my chest again, but for a different reason this time. Are you in some kind of trouble? I asked. He didn't answer at first, just leaned over the railing, the wind playing with the ends of his shirt. Below us, the street had quieted, fewer people. The distant echo of drums still pulsed somewhere in the background, like a fading heartbeat. I told you I left something messy behind, he finally said. What I didn't tell you was that it didn't stay behind. I stood beside him now. What does that mean? He looked at me, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. The guy I got involved with, he wasn't just on the board, he was married, high profile, the kind of guy who can't afford a scandal. He exhaled. When it ended, he panicked. He made it look like I was the one chasing him, manipulating him. There was an internal investigation. My brother defended me, but the damage was done. Some believed me. Others didn't. Jesus, I muttered. Leo's voice cracked a little. People started sending messages, anonymous threats. My phone would buzz at 2 a.m. with garbage like that one. I changed numbers, accounts, but somehow it always finds me. And now it's finding me too, I said quietly. He nodded. I didn't know what to think. I felt this deep ache for him, for the way he carried all this weight while pretending to be fine. But I also felt fear. I barely knew him. And suddenly I was caught in the middle of a story I hadn't asked to be part of. I looked at the street again, at the masks littering the pavement. How fitting, I thought. Everyone wore one here, including Leo. I turned to him. Why me? He looked confused. Why pull me into this? I asked. Was this just about distraction for you? A night to forget the mess? No, he said firmly. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He stepped closer to me. It's real. Eli, I didn't expect to meet anyone tonight. But when I saw you on that rooftop, I don't know. It felt different. You didn't look at me like everyone else does. You didn't know me. You didn't want anything from me. I crossed my arms. Except maybe the truth. He gave me a sad smile. That's something I haven't been able to give anyone in a long time. A long silence followed, the kind that feels like a decision is about to be made. I need some air, I said. Alone. He nodded, stepping back immediately, like he'd already expected it. I'll be here, he said, if you come back. I didn't promise that I would. I just grabbed my phone and walked down the narrow staircase into the street. It was quieter now. The crowd had thinned. I moved aimlessly, letting my feet take me somewhere I could think. I ended up near the river where people were sitting on benches, watching the lights ripple over the water. I found an empty spot and sat down, letting the cool breeze settle over me. I checked my phone again. Another message. He's not who you think. Ask him about the second phone. My blood ran cold. A second phone? I stood up instantly, heart hammering, a sick feeling crawling up my spine. I didn't know what was real anymore, but I knew one thing now. Leo was still hiding something.
I didn't go back to the apartment right away. I walked for nearly an hour, thinking about that message. Ask him about the second phone. It kept echoing, twisting in my mind. I wanted to believe it was just someone trying to scare me, but the longer I avoided the answer, the more the question ate at me. Eventually, I found myself back in front of the building. The lights were off in his unit. For a second, I almost walked away again, but something made me go up. I opened the door quietly. Leo was sitting on the couch, shirt off, head leaned back like he'd been dozing. The mask, that gold mask from the rooftop, was on the table, beside 2 phones. 2. My chest tightened. I walked toward them. He didn't wake up right away. I picked up the second phone. It wasn't locked. The first thing I saw was a message thread labeled Anonymous. There were dozens of texts, some recent. He's asking questions. Keep him close until I say otherwise. You're better at this than I thought. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Leo stirred. Eli? I turned slowly, holding the phone in my hand. What is this? His face drained of color. He sat up fast, rubbing his eyes. Eli, wait. It's not what you think. No, don't do that. Don't lie. I saw everything. I didn't send those, he said, voice desperate. I swear. I kept the phone because I was trying to figure out who was sending them. I've been getting threats for months. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't answer. He stood, took a step closer. I wanted to tell you. I just didn't want to scare you off. You should have trusted me, I said. He swallowed. I know. A long silence fell between us. Why me? I asked again, softer this time. His voice cracked. Because I haven't felt safe around anyone in a long time. And with you, for a moment, I forgot I was supposed to be afraid. I didn't say anything. I was torn between wanting to leave and wanting to believe him, wanting to feel that thing we had before the door knocked, before the second phone. I need time, I said. He nodded, eyes shining. I'll wait. Weeks passed. I didn't hear from him, not directly, but I kept thinking about him, about what we shared, about how much of it was real, and how much of it I'd imagined. One day, a letter arrived at my place. No name, no return address, just a gold Carnival mask drawn in the corner. Inside, there was a handwritten note. I never lied about the way I looked at you. That's all it said. I stared at those words for a long time. And then I went back to New Orleans. I found him exactly where I'd first seen him. Same rooftop, different party, this time without a mask. He looked surprised when he saw me, nervous. I didn't wait. I walked right up to him, pulled him into a kiss, and felt everything from that first night come rushing back. Stronger, messier, more honest. He didn't run this time. We stayed out until the sun came up, and when we walked the quiet streets of the quarter, hand in hand, for once we didn't need masks, not with each other, because in the end, love doesn't ask for perfection, just truth. If this story made you feel something, anything, take a moment. Think about the masks you wear every day. Who do you hide from? What would happen if you let yourself be seen, even just a little? Sometimes the person who scares us the most is the one holding up the mirror. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get more emotional, real stories like this one. You never know when the next chapter of your life will begin, and when it does, will you be brave enough to take off the mask